That's not right. Wood is still expensive. So as an experiment, we bought over 200 sets of chopsticks, and we're gonna try and make something out of them. All right, so I did some math. If I do rows of 8 and then go 20 rows high, that's gonna give me a brick that's about 4 inches by 4 inches. Now I know the size of the mold that I need to make, so I'm able to cast all of these chopsticks inside one mold. And for the mold, I'm just using some scrap plywood that I had laying around. Just to make sure I'm measuring correctly, I'm actually gonna take the scrap that I'm using as my base, line it up as best as I can along the bottom, put a mark, and then from that mark, I'm gonna measure up at least 4.5 inches. Now that I have my 4 sides cut out, I need to cover them in tuck tape so this becomes waterproof and also helps prevent the epoxy and the chopsticks from sticking to the walls of the form. Now I should say, this is an idea that Aaron came up with. And it is something that we've seen other accounts do, so by no means is this an original idea, but definitely something that we wanted to try. And something that I actually think is a practical idea. There's over 80 billion disposable chopsticks made each year, so this is a material that really should be used more than what it is, considering most of the time it's just a disposable one-use item. Now I realize that we purchased the chopsticks that we're using for this project, but we're also talking about maybe going to some local restaurants and seeing if there's a way that we can collect some of the chopsticks they use for future projects. Now I had to individually take apart each set of these chopsticks and turn them end to end when I was putting them in the mold. This for me filled up as much room as possible, and I will say if I did this again, and I probably will do this again, I'll definitely make sure to put this in some sort of a vacuum or pressure pot, because there was a lot of air bubbles that, you know, I do like the texture of, but the reality is a pressure pot really would have helped in this situation. With everything in place, I added a couple clamps and a board to push down just to help compress everything. The next morning on my way to work, and yes, those are socks in my pocket, but on my way to work, I thought I would try and demold the form. Now, I used Total Boat High Performance for this. I didn't use any kind of a deep pour epoxy, just because I knew that a lot of the volume would be taken up by the chopsticks. Now at this point, we really didn't know exactly what we were going to build out of this brick of chopsticks, and I'd be lying if I told you that thinking about what this would actually turn into didn't consume a good part of my workday. Hey, if this is your first time visiting our channel, I would love to see you subscribe. We're trying to do more weekly videos, and we do answer all the questions and comments below, so if you have a question or comment, make sure to leave that so we can get back to you. And as always, thanks for watching. We appreciate the feedback, and we appreciate just the engagement that we get on these videos. It really is a big encouraging thing that makes us want to do more videos and put more time into the content we're making. Once I had the block squared up, I headed over to the bandsaw so I could cut individual veneers out of the block of chopsticks. And I will say, my bandsaw skills are not up to par. Cutting veneers for whatever reason, I've never had any luck with. So if you have any tips, please add those in the comments below, or if there's any videos you think I should watch, I'd love to see those as references. With all my veneers cut, I sent them to the drum sander just to make sure they were smooth as possible. Well, I now have a stack of veneers made from chopsticks. So I'm gonna glue this up into a panel so then I can actually cut up the panel and make something out of said panel. My first thought was to actually do a flood coat with epoxy, but I kind of like all the imperfections and voids, so I'm gonna leave that. But I'm just gonna tape this up like I would tape up a veneer book match and leave it overnight, and then we'll come back and see how it turned out. Now, as you can see here, I'm actually using a scrap of plywood as a straight edge just to make sure I'm butting all my pieces against it. This just makes it so much easier to find a straight edge, even on a piece of material like this that really doesn't have the straightest of edge at this point. And I put blue tape on both sides as I was gluing up this panel. And as you can see here, as you kind of stack it up, it actually holds itself up, so it's really easy to glue the panel up in this way. And after the one side's done, I can come back and add tape to the other side. Now, as you can see here, my Stanley toolbox made a pretty awesome clamping system overnight. And at this point, I also thought I probably didn't need to glue this up into one giant panel. I could have used 2 separate pieces. So it was a good thing that the edge grain to edge grain, as always, didn't stay together. I think I know what I'm gonna do and what I'm gonna make out of these panels. They're all jointed and they're all trimmed up with the table saw, but the end grain is really the part that pops. So quickly jump down in the comments, guess what you think I'm gonna make out of this, or if you have other ideas for future projects, because I'm probably gonna mess with this again. But the idea is I'm gonna cut up my pieces for what I'm gonna make, and I'm gonna make some veneers, more so now, out of the end grain, and we're gonna go from there, and you have to see what we're gonna make. When I was cutting the veneers, I used the thin ripped table saw jig from Rockler just to keep my fingers as safely away from the blade as possible. And the thin rip jig is an awesome way just to make sure you get all those consistent pieces. And consistently keep those pieces of your fingers attached. I was actually surprised at how easy this was to work with as far as a material. The reality is I shouldn't. Chopsticks are made from bamboo, and they are a material that's readily used in lots of different woodworking projects. And by the way, if you want to check out a great account that's doing some amazing things with recycled chopsticks, check out Chop Value on Instagram. You'll definitely be inspired. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know that I prefer most of the time to use actual physical real world measurements. And this is one of my easiest tricks, is I want to know what side my inside panel needs to be. So I'm going to perfectly line up my two sides and then strike a mark. That mark thing is going to be able to give me a spot to measure to, so I can figure out exactly what my bottom needs to be. And I'm sitting at 9 3/8. Sorry, I'm sitting at 9 3/16. I promise I can read a tape measure, even though Canada's metric. For assembly, I used a combination of CA glue and this UV epoxy from Total Boat. Trying to clamp this would have been an absolute nightmare. The sides are just way too thin, so using the CA glue in combination with the UV epoxy just made things a lot easier and go a lot quicker. And if you're wanting to try either of these products, I do have them linked in the description. And as well, there's a discount code there that you can use at checkout to save a little bit on your purchase. This little chunk of walnut I've had sitting around for a long time, and it really struck me that this is the project that was finally meant for. Even though it gave me some problems, but you'll see that later on in the video. I stacked and glued the veneers all along the sides of the piece of walnut. Anyone figure out what I'm building yet? At this point, I was able to start sanding any of the extra glue runoff and all my pieces together. I wasn't about to use any power tools on this, so I just used hand sanding, and I started about 180 grit. I also realized I didn't love the scale of what I was building, so on the bottom section, I did cut off a third. Grain popped all my parts and just got back from lunch, and that's not right. The lid is curved. By the way, I'm making a box. I'm gonna try and wet it down and clamp it down just to see if I can get it back to shape. But it makes sense. The walnut is super thin and it just kind of pulled everything kind of on an angle. So I'm kind of not surprised, but I mean, it's an experiment. Now I thought it would help to just put a bit of water on both sides of the walnut and clamp it down to my end vise. But then I kind of realized that it would actually probably do better inside the vise. I left the lid to dry inside the vise for a couple hours, and I'll tell you, it did make a difference. And this gave me the opportunity to use a piece of the scrap to make a bit of a handle for the top of the box. Now, it wasn't perfectly flat when I was done, but it was a heck of a lot better than what it was. For finish, I just used wood honey from Total Boat. This is just a great food-safe finish that's super easy to apply, and I really love the way it looks on things like walnut, and I guess chopsticks now. Just look at how cool that end grain looks on the sides of the lid. And you might ask what the box is for? Well, for holding chopsticks, of course. I love the way the end grain of the chopsticks just hits against the darkness of that walnut. And this was probably a 3-day project that I really had fun doing, and definitely is something that sparked some other ideas. Now, I don't think it'd be that difficult to find some resources locally to be able to find recycled chopsticks. We did find a couple things online on how to actually clean and prepare the chopsticks before using them in this kind of a project. I'm also glad I found a home for that lonely piece of walnut. I am so excited about how this turned out. And obviously, it's just a simple box. But the reality is this was an amazing experiment. It was cool to try something new and get a couple of new ideas for maybe future projects. So if you like this kind of content, let me know. If you're not subscribed already, I would love it if you did that. And make sure you smash that like button. That lets other people that are looking for this kind of content know that this is a video that they'll probably want to watch. Everyone, if you're looking for another video to check out, I've got some lined up over here. You can check out what else we've done in the past. And as always, thanks for watching.